Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission and ask for roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except Commissioner Rumble.
Okay. And I just want to announce that prior to convening now at 4 o'clock, we did take a field trip. The commission took a field trip to one of our agenda items tonight on Franz Kafka Avenue, and present were all commissioners with the exception of Commissioner Weeks and Commissioner Rumble. We have no minutes yet to approve, so we're not going to do that. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to public comments, which is a time for any member of the public to address the commission on any matters of interest to the commission that are not listed tonight as a public hearing. So with that, I'll go ahead and open public comments, and I have 2 cards. So I will start with Amelia Chapman. And you know the drill, so you have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Amelia Chapman. I'm here to talk about the proposed cell tower at 510 Lewis Road. And I ask that you consider the facts involved with this situation, and to please consider not approving the permit for the cell tower. The reason why, primarily, is the aesthetics of the neighborhood. This is a historic neighborhood in the JC area. It's a mixed, diverse neighborhood. You've got renters, you've got families, you've got retired people who have put in many, many years into the neighborhood. The tower will significantly change that. It is 7 stories tall, and I apologize, I'm a little bit, this is an issue that's very important to me, so it's a little bit hard to speak about, but we're, in the community, we're very upset. I know it looks like from the map there's maybe only a handful of neighbors that are maybe directly involved, but it's actually quite a few families, retired people in the community that are directly affected, as well as the surrounding area. This is going to be 7 stories tall. It will be the largest building by far in the area, the largest structure. And even though Verizon calls it a stealth tower, there's nothing stealthy about a Lego tree 7 stories tall. Also, I'd like to bring up the fact the first notification came in June from the city. I've called multiple times to Andy Gustafson, who is the contact listed on the letter, and he has not returned phone calls since June. So he did call me one time in June, but I have since called many times. I've called multiple numbers. At first, in June, I do recall it was his own voicemail. Apparently it's changed, or maybe he's taken a new job, I don't know. I still see his name listed in the paper for the permit notifications that are going out. And I've called that number as well for Andy Gustafson, but I've received no phone calls back. And what's really frustrating is I can't go to the other city of Santa Rosa. I can't go to the other city employee. Apparently he's the one to talk to about this particular issue, but it's not right for him to not return a phone call. 2-3 minutes is all I'm asking. What's the status? Haven't heard anything. Is it going in? Is it not? I would really appreciate a phone call back, and I think as a resident, of the city of Santa Rosa, I think I should have that. A simple phone call back to know what the status is. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapman. And next is Scott Chapman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again in protest of the cell phone tower proposed for 510 Lewis Road. I'd like to speak specifically today about the real physical impact it's going to have to myself and my wife as homeowners and to our community, both renters, homeowners, and the owners of properties that are rented. We have a fair number of rentals in the neighborhood. It's not a big issue to us. I've been a landlord before. I'm currently a business owner. I know how difficult it is to run a business. Cell phone towers are not good business when you're talking residential. This tower is proposed in a location, it cannot get any closer to a residential neighborhood. It can't. It is as close as possible. Anyone who has a rental in that neighborhood will take a real hit to their business, because study after study shows, you can argue the science of the health of it left and right. It's not decided science yet, but people don't like it. People are nervous about the health concerns. Study after study by reputable real estate and other research firms show that people don't want to live around them. That means property values go down, up to 30%. Rental costs go down, so people who make a business out of their rental are losing money. We have made the very difficult decision of deciding that if this cell tower goes in, we are leaving. If I had the time, I'd tell you about the 5 years it took us to get back into that house after moving 5 times in 5 years, following work when the economy tanked. This was the end of our journey, was buying this home. And now, if this goes in, we will leave. And so then we get the double hit of, it goes in, we lose our home, granted it is a choice, but it's a choice forced upon us, and then it kills our property values. So now we can't sell the house for as much as it's worth. We have to disclose it. You don't disclose good things, you disclose bad things. You have to disclose the cell tower. If it was a good thing, they wouldn't use the term disclose. You only do that when there are bad things. Next door to us is a apartment building. It is our understanding that the owners of that apartment building will have to write into their contracts a release for their tenants to sign that says they understand there is a cell tower there and they accept those risks. You don't do that for a good thing. You do that for a bad thing. This cell tower in this location is a bad thing. It will hurt property values. It will hurt the families living there, because I guarantee you there's no one in the neighborhood that is happy about it. I invite any or all of you to come stand in my backyard and look at where the 7-story tower is going to be, and then say to yourselves, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea to this neighborhood, because it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Anyone else wishing to speak under public comments tonight? I'm not seeing anyone else rise, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and move on to Planning Commissioner's report. Any reports tonight? No? Okay. Well, I'll just report that we, as a commission, had the wonderful opportunity this past weekend and earlier part of the week to attend the APA Planners Conference in Sacramento, which was a great opportunity for us. There were a number of seminars that were specific to planning commissioners, so again, we really appreciate the city having made that opportunity for us. I think we all really benefited. We saw a number of things that are coming up on our radar regarding cannabis and density issues, housing crisis issues. So I think particularly as there's a lot of new commissioners, it was really timely that we were able to go and kind of get everybody started with a really good educational opportunity. So thank you, staff, for making that happen. With that, we'll move on to department reports.
All right, looking forward to our future meetings. I wanted to make note that our next meeting of October 12th has 3 items that are confirmed, which means the public hearing notices are scheduled to go out on time to meet that date. One of them is the comprehensive cannabis ordinance. There is another one that's noted. I know you have this list, so it's the Verizon Wireless SRJC temporary site. It's a cell site. It's not the Lewis Road site that was just mentioned in public appearances. But it's a temporary cell tower. And then there's another cultivation facility that's proposed. Those are the 3 items. And then also wanted to let you know of, so looking at city council agendas, they are obviously focused on studying district elections, so a lot of the calendar is quite full till through the end of the year. So, but we've worked with the city manager's office, and we have several hearings that have moved forward from commission actions onto the city council. So, if you do look at future agendas, December 5th has at least 5 or 6 public hearings related to either work that commission has done or items that are related to commission interests. So, for example, the ADU policy is finally made it onto an agenda for council, and that will be December 5th. And then there's a series of pre-zonings and rezonings that have been acted on by the commission that are headed up that way. We are looking at November 1st. It would be a special meeting of the city council to complete the hearing process with the city council on the cannabis policy. So you might want to keep that in mind. I think it's a Wednesday. And just a quick response to today's comments under public appearances. Senior planner Andy Gustafson was in attendance, so we were able to connect those two. So we'll make sure we make contact with those individuals.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Gronica has a question. Ms. Hartman.
Claire, I have on my calendar, I'm looking at the upcoming meetings for a subdivision committee meeting on October 11th from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Is that correct or true, or is it my imagination?
Yeah, it's noted as confirmed, which means that the public hearing notice has been sent on that. Is that an unusual day for a subdivision committee, or is that a regular day? I know you've worked together with staff to set up a more predictable pattern for those meetings. But because it says confirmed, I'm inclined to say that the public hearing notices have been set for that date.
Haven't said, okay.
Is that right? Okay.
Okay. Okay, so next we have statements of abstention by commissioners. Any abstentions tonight?
I'll be abstaining from item 9.2. My law firm represents the applicant on general business matters.
Okay, none others. Okay, great. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our public hearings tonight. Our first one, 9.1, is the Liner Village tentative map extension. It is an ex parte disclosure. Commissioner Peterson?
I have no ex parte communications to disclose.
I have no ex parte communication to disclose.
I have nothing to disclose.
I have nothing to disclose.
There. I also have nothing to disclose.
Okay, and I also have nothing to disclose. So Patrick Streeter is staff and will be giving us the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Siska, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is an application for a one-year time extension for the Liner Village tentative map. The project proposes 16 market rate single-family units. You're familiar with this slide. It shows our housing allocation plan for the number of units that the city would like to have constructed by the year 2022. With 16 market rate units, this project would achieve 0.6% of that market rate goal. The one-year time extension would be for a tentative map that subdivides a 2-acre parcel into 16 single-family lots. The lots would vary in size from slightly less than 3,000 square feet to over 6,000 square feet. And the subdivision also includes improvements to Dennis Lane and Elwyn Lane, as well as construction of a new street, which would be La Chalupa Lane. The new expiration date, should the Planning Commission choose to approve this time extension, would be February 28th, 2018. The project is located in on the northern border on the west side of the city of Santa Rosa. It's just north of Dennis Lane at the intersection of Elwyn Lane and is comprised of 3 parcels. One of those parcels is developed with a single-family house. The other 2 are vacant. There is single-family residential development to the east, west, and south of the parcel. as well as several approved tentative maps that have not been acted on at this time. Directly north of the parcel is County of Sonoma jurisdiction, presently being used as an agricultural vineyard property. Back in 1991, the parcels around Dennis Lane were annexed into the city. They were designated with an RR20 pre-zoning, so rural residential pre-zoning. At that time, the general plan designation was changed from very low-density residential to low-density residential. So with the low-density residential, that allows 2 to 8 units per acre, so there was a slight increase in density allowable. In February of 2008, the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council adopt a mitigated negative declaration for the project, and also recommended that the council rezone the parcel from RR20 to R16, a single-family residential designation that would implement that general plan designation. At that time, the Planning Commission also approved the tentative map for this project, as well as a small lot conditional use permit for the parcels that are smaller than 6,000 square feet. In 2010, the map would have expired. However, several automatic state extensions were granted, setting the new expiration date for the map to be February 28, 2017. The applicant submitted the request for a time extension prior to that date, so since the application was in process, that map did not expire, and it's now before the Planning Commission for determination as to whether to grant that extension up to February 28, 2018. As was mentioned, the general plan for the area is low-density residential. It allows a 2 to 8 unit per acre density. The project parcels, as well as most of the surrounding parcels to the east, west, and south, share that designation. The zoning implements that designation with an R16 single-family residential zoning. The project would be permitted by right, with the exception of that conditional use permit required for the small lot subdivision. Also, prior to this meeting, but after the publication of your staff report, 2 comments have been received by the public relating to this project. One was a recommendation that the Planning Commission, as a general rule with time extension requests, use the threat of denial of those requests to encourage developers to begin construction of their projects. So they were referencing several fallow lots that have approved projects that aren't being constructed. Staff responded to that member of the public and noted that the state automatically granted several time extensions, but the city does have a finite number of extensions that would be granted to a project. Additionally, a comment was received asking if the project has changed since the original approval. The neighbor had mentioned that other projects in the area had downsized their density, and staff did a little research, and while one parcel opted to construct by right, so put a single-family house on the parcel without implementing that map, most of the other parcels surrounding this project have approved tentative maps, and they're in various stages of acting on those maps. And with this project in particular, there's been no change since the original approvals in 2008. And this is that approved tentative map. As you can see, there will be a new street constructed off of Elwyn Lane, and the parcels will be arranged with frontages along that new street as well as along Dennis Lane. As was mentioned, an initial study was prepared for the project, which resulted in a mitigated negative declaration, which was adopted on March 25th, 2008. Because there's been no change to the project or to the surrounding area, staff finds no additional environmental review being necessary for this environmental approval. And it is recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the Planning Commission approve the 1-year time extension for the Liner Village tentative map. The applicant team and the applicant are present. They don't have a presentation prepared, but they're available to answer questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions of staff? Yeah, Commissioner Weeks.
Patrick, on the staff report, it's under the Board Commission Committee Review and Recommendation, which is page 6, talks about the 1-year extension request has not been reviewed by any additional review authorities. What other review authorities would have to review this?
There would not typically be other review authorities that would review it. The Planning Commission is the review authority for extensions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Okay. Since the applicant isn't intending to make a presentation, any questions of the applicant? We need to bring them down. Okay. All right. Well, this is a public hearing. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to come down and speak on this item, feel free. You don't have to have filled out a card. I'm not seeing anybody move to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Like our resolutions here. So, someone like to begin to move a resolution?
Okay. I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa granting a one-year extension of time for Liner Village, a subdivision located at 2055 Dennis Lane, Santa Rosa, assessors parcel numbers 059-010-016-037 and -038, file number EXT17-0013, and waive for the reading.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Anyone wanting to discuss this? Okay, short and sweet. Okay, so with that, we have it moved and seconded. Your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Rumble being absent. And that was the only resolution on that one. Okay. So we're going to move on to 9.2. Vice Chair Edmondson is exiting the chambers to abstain. And let me get to it. And so 9.2 is our public hearing tonight on the Middle Rincon Road subdivision. It is an ex parte disclosure. And so, Commissioner Pearson.
I visited the site and have no additional disclosures.
Okay.
I have nothing to disclose.
I visited the site and have nothing new to disclose.
I also visited the site and have nothing new to disclose.
And I also visited the site and also have nothing new to disclose. And Mr. Gustafson is going to be our staff presenter. Whenever you're
Good
ready.
evening. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, Madam Chair, Andy Gustafson, Senior Planner. This is a small lot residential subdivision. The property is located at 243 Middle Rincon Road. It is property owner, or I should say property applicant, is Phil Natoli. This application would create, this project would create 2 new parcels for development with single-family residential units. It's a small lot subdivision because the 2 new lots will be less than 6,000 square feet. And also, this property, that triggers then a need for a conditional use permit, as well as a tentative map. Because this property is in RR20 zoning, there is also a rezoning accompanying it to R16. Staff is recommending approval of the project as it makes the required findings in order to fit that community location and be consistent with the general plan and zoning code. As I mentioned, this is a lot off of Middle Rincon. It is a little less than a half acre. It's currently developed with a single-family residence. That residence would be retained on a remainder lot of 7,918 square feet. And then behind it, the subdivision would create 2 new lots. Each would be approximately 5,700 square feet. Those 2 new lots would be accessed by a driveway, and I should start using my PowerPoint to illustrate the project. Move past the setting here. It's off of Rincon, north of Highway 12. And this is the project site. And you can see the existing single-family residential unit at the front. The 2 lots would be created to the rear, And I'm sorry, and that's the configuration that would ultimately be built on the site. There is an existing access over the northern part of the property that serves the residents to the west. That would be maintained and improved. It would be primary access for the 2 new lots, as well as continue to serve the single-family residents on the property to the west. The zoning setback standards for small lot subdivisions are accomplished here. There's 19 feet in the front, from the front of the building porch to the front of driveway. I'm sorry, is that correct? Side yard setbacks are met, as well as the rear. The lot coverage is well under. I got myself out of sequence here. I'm going to finish the development standards. The lot sizes that were mentioned are less than 6,000 square feet, but that's permissible with this conditional use permit. The building height limit is 35 feet. These buildings would be 26, which is adequate or within the standard. Also, with a small lot subdivision, when you have 2-story buildings, no more than 25% of the units within the entire subdivision shall be, or at least 25% of the units shall be 1-story, and that front building is a 1-story building. And then all of the 2-story buildings must have 1-story elements, and I'll show you an elevation or a floor plan that indicates that a portion of the buildings are 2-story and a portion 1-story. Lot coverage, the maximum allowed on these smaller lots is 65%. In this case, lots 1 and 2 would be 49 and 51%, so that development standard would be met. With smaller lots, it's important to maintain private open space, and there's a 400 square foot minimum for it. The rear yards that serve lots 1 and 2 are approximately 1,000 square feet, and they are more than 15 feet wide, which is the minimum dimension that can be, that lot area can be reduced to. And then finally, with regard to parking, each of the units are required 4 parking spaces. There are 2 within the 2-car parking garage, 2-car garages, and then 2 that can be parked in tandem in the driveway apron. And then in addition, there are, on each of the lots, a part of that private driveway access, there are these parallel parking spaces that resemble a turnout on the north side of the property. To jump back, and I apologize for doing this to you, to the general plan consistency, the zoning for the property that's recommended R1 6,000 would be consistent with the current low-density residential land use designation, which allows for a residential density of 2 to 8 units per acre. The resulting density on this project would be 6, so it lies right above the midpoint residential density that is sought in this type of development. In this situation, the general plan is careful to, with policy, to make sure that the development fits the site and the community. And in this case, the policies that are listed in the report to you show that the subdivision will complement the residential character of the area. It will add diversity to the housing stock in the area or in the neighborhood. The landscaping that's proposed along the north boundary and along that frontage, the entrance of the driveway will help to integrate this improved access to these dwelling units with the street, both aesthetically and functionally. And finally, this project will help meet the housing needs of the city by adding 2 new dwelling units, where currently the property is occupied by 1. I did bounce past rapidly the one slide that showed that this project would, and I'll backtrack, add an incremental bit towards improving the county's or the city's overall need for housing by adding 2 units. With regard to design guidelines, again, these guidelines are here to help to ensure that small lot subdivisions will exemplify superior design and to help to ensure that they fit functionally and aesthetically. And the report states, and I can review that now. We'll take a look at the building designs here. These are rendered elevations submitted by the applicant to show the architectural treatment of each. They'll have a different character, so they won't be homogeneous in design. You can see here too that there is a 2-story element with a 1-story element blended in the building, so it's not a monolithic structure. And the materials that are proposed are wood and horizontal siding and also vertical siding. And the window treatments and architectural detail wraps around the building. These would be 3-bedroom units and would provide direct access to the exterior, to the rear yard, and also have access to the front in that reduced front yard area. This project did go out to a neighborhood meeting where we had one neighbor attend, and that neighbor expressed concern about the orientation of 2nd-story windows on lot number 1, which I think I can point with this lot here. The 2-story element previously was aligned along that west property line, and the neighbor was concerned about rear yard privacy intrusion that may be caused by that window. The applicant met with the neighbor and agreed to flip the floor plan to move that window away from the property line and thus resolve that potential issue. There have been no other comments either out of that neighborhood meeting or subsequently with the notice of this public hearing. The project would have standard public street improvements along the frontage, particularly in this area of the driveway, to help to ensure that the sight lines for vehicles, and particularly exiting, would be adequate for if a left turn movement headed north on Middle Rincon. There are no additional requirements to achieve the minimum 20-foot wide common driveway within a 40-foot easement. Standard drainage and water improvements are required. The project, because it's consistent with the 2035 general plan and that hasn't adopted EIR, and that there's no special environmental circumstance on the property, such as a creek or steep slopes or any other known sensitive species, does qualify for an exemption under CEQA per section 15183, and thus no additional environmental review is required. The main issue that concerns this project is tree removal. There are 13 trees on the property. 6 on-site trees qualify as protected trees, including 1 redwood tree. 4 of these trees would be removed. 4 of these trees would be removed, and I'll point out the redwood trees here on the west side. These 2 are cherry plum trees, which also are protected, And then this one is what? I forget. I think, yeah, it is, I think it might be an oak, I'm not sure. Anyway, it is a designated protected tree. The redwood tree is a heritage tree. These two other X'd out trees which will be removed, those are not protected. They are domestic plum trees and aren't subject to protection. With the removal, and then these other trees that are in green, they will be protected. With the removal of these 4 trees, a total of 8 trees are required to be planted on the site, and they have, 13, get this right. A total of, 13 trees will have to be planted on the site. Their landscape plan shows 8. These trees along the north property line and this one feature tree on Lot 1. So there is a condition of approval associated with the tentative map that does require either a fee for each of the trees or a revised landscape plan for the replacement. There are 3 resolutions that staff recommends this Planning Commission act on this evening. They're listed not in the order in which the actions need to take place, so I would like to call your attention to the attachments on page 11 of 11, and in the moving on this, in acting on this project, staff recommends that the Commission first act on resolution number 3 to recommend the zoning map, the zoning text amendment to the Planning Commission, and then act on the small lots conditional use permit resolution, and then finally the tentative map resolution. That concludes staff's report. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer those.
Any questions of staff right now? Great, thanks, Mr. Gustafson. And is the applicant here wanting to present?
He is, and he might want to make a comment.
Okay, come on down.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Thanks for having us here tonight. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present our project to you this evening. I want to thank Andy for doing such a great job and presenting this project. And I just have a few things to add, if I may. Okay. Well, let's see. This is, start by saying this is a very small project. So unlike some of the other projects you'll have this evening, this is, and it doesn't really chip away too aggressively at the housing problem that we have, but it does help, and every little bit does add up to actually helping solve our housing crunch that we're in right now. You know, we first started looking at this project and thinking that we could put maybe one home on this site and try to save some of the trees and what have you. But we started looking at it, and it really made sense with the lack of available land in Rincon Valley right now and developable land in that area that we look at pushing the limit a little bit more and trying to get the 2 houses on there. And by laying it out and putting it together, it looked like as an end result, it's a great project, and it has plenty of room and gives the houses plenty of yard space. There's a private lane accessing the property. It's located in a walkable neighborhood. It's in an area that hasn't seen a whole lot of development in the last few years as far as new housing. There are some new townhouses that have been built, but not nearly enough to provide for the demand that I think this area has. And while we know that the area has a lack of good housing right now and a lack of new housing, Let's see here. So a couple of things our project provides, it maximizes the density. It's consistent with the general plan. We add desperately needed housing, to this area that hasn't seen a whole lot of new housing in the last probably 15 years. It's mostly built out, and there's a lot of housing room on the west side of town, but not a lot on the east side of town. We are very close to many playing fields, parks for recreation. We have we're promoting affordable homes that are 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, that'll allow 2 good-sized families to move in and to raise their children in an area of Rincon Valley that has very desirable schools and has quite a few amenities, with close by. We have Oliver's Market, we have a shopping center, we have schools within walkable distance of this project site, and we also are very close to commute access for anybody driving to and from work. So we have major arteries such as Middle Rincon Road, Montecito, and of course connecting to Farmers Lane and Highway 12. We hope you look favorably upon our project this evening. And if you have any questions of myself or my staff, we do have our architect up here, Matt Taylor, from Farrell and Faber. They did a fantastic job. Would you be able to show that architecture one more time? I want you to take a look at the architecture because I think Farrell and Faber does an absolutely great job on their architecture. And there's this one, and then maybe, there we go. So I think you'll agree with me that the architecture is very well planned. There's a lot of amenities within the home itself. We plan on installing quartz countertops. This house is laid out very, very well with an open concept floor plan, a very nice tall ceiling. So it's going to be a very nice home and a nice addition to the community here. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, do let us know.
Okay, don't go away yet. Any questions of the applicant right now? I have 2.
Oh, good.
I just want to be sure that the part that you're flipping is the second story element. The garages are going to, the driveways will still be next to each other.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure about that.
Yeah.
And then are there any plans to improve the existing residence?
The existing residence has been remodeled in the past. We may re-site it. It does have a vinyl siding on it, which we'd like to do away with, so that would be about it. The interior has been redone, and it's actually a great little house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this again is a public hearing tonight. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to come down and speak on this item, feel free. And I am not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. And if we will begin with the rezoning resolution for our purposes of discussion, I think we'll be in the right order.
Okay. I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa recommending to City Council rezoning of property located at 243 Middle Rincon Road, Assessor's Parcel Number 182-210-013 to the R16 Single Family Residential District, File Number PRJ17-015, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson. And let's go ahead and discuss this generally, and we'll get to the other resolutions and fix them if we need to. Commissioner Duggan, how about if you start?
Sure. I think it's a good project. I think it's appropriate to rezone it and add a few more houses. I like that the existing house is being retained. I like that the small lots are small lot by our definition, but they aren't that small. They have a good amount of outside room, and they're not too crammed together, and they're good-sized houses. I think they're attractive. I like that it's close to amenities, and I think it's consistent with the general plan, and so I'm in favor of the project.
Okay, great. Commissioner Peterson, how about you?
Well, I would concur with Commissioner Duggan. I think it's a good project. I like the density. I think it's appropriate for that neighborhood, having sort of seen where it's located. I agree. I think the smaller lot, while retaining what sounds like a nice sized backyard, will be good for the area. It's a nice area. And I certainly appreciate the applicant's sensitivity to the neighbors' privacy concerns. So I would make all necessary findings in support of rezoning.
Okay, great. Commissioner Veronica.
I too think this is a good little project and really have no specific questions as it relates to or concerns as it relates to how it is laid out. I used to live in this neighborhood when I first came to Santa Rosa 35 years ago, and that's maybe the first project in that area in about that time. One comment, and it perhaps is more for the city, and that is when you visit the site, and it's on that curve on Middle Rincon as you're going southbound, and I notice it's a little uncomfortable, I guess is the way I'd say it, when you're pulling away or trying to pull back into the southbound traffic. I don't know if there's anything that could be done, but it is, I did notice that it's a little dicey, that's all.
Commissioner Weeks.
I also think it's a good project, and if I remember right, when you were here not too long ago with another project, you also had worked with the neighbors. I think that was around hours. So I appreciate the fact that you're doing that, and that it's also towards the middle higher range of the density. So I'm in support of the project.
Great. And I'm also in support of the project for many of the reasons stated. I always like it when we retain residences and you work with the residents. I really appreciate that. And Mr. Natoli, you're gaining quite a reputation for being the neighborhood-friendly developer with hours. I noticed that you even adjusted your Saturday hours for this one, so that's great. And so with that, Commissioner Rumble, I'm going to declare you absent, even though you're here. You weren't able to hear this item, so that's what we'll do. We'll call you absent for now, okay? So with that, that was again moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson, and your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Commissioner Rumble being semi-absent and Vice Chair Edmondson having to abstain. And with that, let's move on to the conditional use permit resolution.
Okay, I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a residential small lot subdivision conditional use permit for the Middle Rincon subdivision located at 243 Middle Rincon Road, assessor parcel number 182-210-013, file number PRJ17-015, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson. Any other discussion? And your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Commissioner Rumble being absent, Vice Chair Edmondson needing to abstain. And one more.
And I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the Middle Rincon subdivision tentative parcel map located at 243 Middle Rincon Road, assessor's parcel number 182-210-013, file number PRJ17-015, and waive further reading.
Second.
Again, that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Commissioner Rumble being absent, Vice Chair Edmondson needing to abstain. And that concludes this item, so thank you. Okay, why don't we just take a real quick break and give Vice Chair Edmondson a chance to come. Oh, here he comes. Does anybody need a break? Not seeing that. Okay, so then we are going to press on. And Move to our next item, which is 9.3, a public hearing on the residences at Taylor Mountain and the Taylor Mountain Estates.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you don't mind, staff would respectfully request a 5-minute break to
Oh,
prepare
sure.
for this next item.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
ready to reconvene? Okay. So with that, we will move on to 9.3, which is a public hearing for the residences at Taylor Mountain and Taylor Mountain Estates, and it is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Peterson.
As noted by the chair earlier, I took a trip to the site, visited the site, and spoke with the applicant and have no additional disclosures.
Commissioner Rumble.
Although I wasn't able to join the field trip, I was able to visit the site.
I visited the site, and the applicant clarified the location of the midden that's shown on the existing drawings from, I think, 2005. And that was the only additional information.
Okay.
I was taking part in the field trip. I visited the site and heard from the applicant, but have nothing new to disclose.
Commissioner Gronka.
I visited the site, heard from the applicant, and have nothing further to disclose.
I also visited the site, not today, but previously, and have nothing further to disclose.
And I was a party to the field trip today, meeting with the applicant, and have nothing new to disclose. And with that, Amy Nicholson will do our staff presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Cisco and members of the Commission. The item before you is the residences at Taylor Mountain and Taylor Mountain Estates project. This is our housing allocation plan slide, which you're familiar with, and it shows the city's housing goals by income up to the year 2022. The entitlements before you would comprise a total of 81 market rate units, 74 of which would be multifamily and 7 would be single family, which represents 3.2% of the market rate goal, and would also include 19 low income units, which represents 3.2% of that unit count as well. So this project really consists of two components. One is called the residences at Taylor Mountain. This portion of the project consists of the development of an approximately 5-acre site, which is currently comprised of 6 multifamily parcels. Would include the development of 93 multifamily units and on-site improvements, including parking and common landscape areas. And the entitlements related to this proposal before the Commission tonight are both a density bonus and hillside development permit. And this proposal would also include a subsequent design review entitlement. The Taylor Mountain Estates component of the project consists of the subdivision of a 7.78 acre site, which is located in the southeastern portion of the existing subdivision. It's comprised of 3 parcels and would allow for 7 detached single-family dwellings. No architecture has been submitted for these single-family dwellings at this time, so a subsequent hillside development permit will be required to construct these homes as they're proposed on lots that exceed a slope of 10%. Entitlements for the Taylor Mountain Estates component before the Planning Commission include a tentative map and a hillside development permit for that tentative map. The project site is located in southeast Santa Rosa. There are 2 addresses associated with it, but essentially it's at the intersection of Petaluma Hill Road and Yolanda and the future Farmers Lane extension. And here's an aerial photograph of the site and surrounding area. So these lots here are all existing lots. These were actually approved as a part of the Kiwanis Meadows subdivision. This map was recorded back in 2005. And so the 6 multifamily lots that are requesting the density bonus and hillside development permit this evening are outlined here in yellow. And the proposed 7-lot subdivision is within this area here, which is blue. Project has quite an extensive history going back to 1997 when the Planning Commission approved the tentative map, which resulted in the Kiwanis Meadows subdivision. Additional 1-year extensions had to be granted, and based on the city's research and proposal for the Farmers Lane extension. An additional extension had to be requested back in 2004 to allow for the map to stay alive during that time period. When the final extension went back to the Planning Commission for approval in 2004, the commission found that it was inconsistent with the hillside development standards that were new and denied it. It was appealed to the City Council, and after modifications, the tentative map was ultimately approved by the Council. Subsequent to the approval, the final map was recorded and improvement plans were signed and approved. So that allowed for future grading of the approved subdivision, which commenced in October of 2015. Several months after grading commenced, the applicant received a notice of violation from the Regional Water Quality Board and have since complied with all necessary corrective actions. In February of this year, applications for both the residences at Taylor Mountain and Taylor Mountain Estates proposals were submitted to the city. There was a neighborhood meeting held for both components of the project in May. 2 neighbors did attend who had questions about the city's development review process but weren't particularly interested in the proposal itself. In July, the Taylor Mountain Estates proposal, which is the 7-lot subdivision, went before the Waterways Advisory Committee for comment based on its proximity to Todd Creek. There's a little summary included in your staff report, but generally the committee found the site difficult to locate, so their feedback probably wasn't as meaningful as it could have been if they had been able to identify the site properly. But based on the proposed sensitive deed habitat restriction, which I'll go into in a moment, there's quite a distance between the proposed development and the creek, which is ideal to have more of that buffer there. In August of this year, the mitigated negative declaration for the proposal was released for the 30-day public review period. And an additional event has taken place since this slide was made. The proposal went before, just the multifamily proposal went before the design review board just for some concept feedback because of the interaction between the design review board and the planning commission with hillside development permits and multifamily projects. The sites we're talking about this evening include a variety of general plan land use designations, including medium-low density residential and medium density residential for the multifamily parcels, and very low density residential for the single family subdivision. In general, staff has found that the residences at Taylor Mountain proposal is consistent with a number of general plan policies related to land use, urban design, and housing, in that the proposal will allow for additional units, certainly at a higher point than the minimum density allowed under the general plan, and would maintain a variety of housing types within the area. In addition, view corridors to natural ridge lines and landmarks, including, as it calls out, Taylor Mountain, are preserved by this proposal. And as I may have mentioned earlier, the multifamily component includes 19 affordable units, so this proposal would expand the supply of housing available to low-income households. The Taylor Mountain Estates proposal has been found mostly consistent with a number of general plan policies related to land use, urban design, and open space and conservation. Similar policy was cited related to preservation of natural landmarks, including Taylor Mountain, in addition to not breaking any sort of ridge line and conserving many of the significant natural features that are on the site. However, there is an inconsistency, or somewhat of an inconsistency, which is explored in more detail in the staff report related to development on slopes that exceed 25%. This is prohibited in the general plan. However, the zoning code gives further direction that Upon review of development plans, staff should ensure that grading respects significant natural features and visually blends with the adjacent properties. Staff has found that the proposal on slopes exceeding 25% to be minor based on the visual impacts verified through both a site visit and also a visual analysis. The project site is zoned for planned development or as a planned development. And to clarify, there's a larger planned development which is part of the southeast area called PD 96001, and then F is just kind of a small part of that. That original plan development expected 10 projects that were going through a process and then required subsequent plan development specific to those projects. This proposal has been found consistent with what is actually listed in the policy statement, although there aren't really many development standards in there. That was reviewed by staff. In addition, any hillside development standards have been reviewed and found the proposal is in compliance except for where they're seeking a concession, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Parking standards have been met as required by the zoning code, in addition to building height on the multifamily component and lot coverage percentages. So as I mentioned earlier, the project did have a mitigated negative declaration prepared. There was a 30-day circulation period that commenced on August 29th. And at the time that the slide was prepared, no comments were received. I recently received a letter from Caltrans, which has been provided at your dais, which discusses several things that they would like to see in the traffic study. Our city traffic engineer was not available to be here based on the short notice, but generally found that those are items that were discussed in the traffic study. We also have the consultants that helped with the environmental document available, and so they might be able to speak more if you have any questions related to the traffic study. Based on the environmental document, there were several mitigation measures formulated in the listed impact areas here, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to those. An additional comment is that although this comment wasn't received in response to the mitigated negative declaration, there was a comment received from Sonoma County Regional Parks about the desire for there to be some sort of conservation buffer between the proposed single-family development on the eastern property line and Taylor Mountain Regional Park. There was an aesthetics mitigation measure formulated to somewhat address this, which is aesthetics measure number 2. And so that is listed in the environmental document and would be required should the environmental document be adopted. Bringing us back to the site, this is the proposed development plan. And so although these lots down here are before you and these lots up here, each of these lots that has natural slopes that exceed 10% would also require a hillside development permit, but those are not before you this evening. As I mentioned, there is a hillside development permit required for some of the lots, and specifically those are proposed lots 2A and 4A. This is basically lot 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 as they exist now. That they're proposing a lot merger, which is a ministerial process through our engineering department. The yellow color is actually the flattest portion of the site, so these portions are less than a 10% slope, so they aren't subject to the hillside development ordinance. However, the green and blue area, sorry, it's kind of difficult to tell from, that screen's a little bit better. But basically the non-yellow colors are the ones that are slopes that exceed 10% and thus are subject to the hillside development standards. These are two renderings from the two unit types that are proposed on each of the multifamily lots. This is the 3-unit building and the 4-unit building. Each of the units would have its own covered parking space in the carport, and then there would be tandem driveway parking as well. And there are some additional parking spaces scattered throughout each of the lots as well. Here is a visual analysis that's required by the zoning code for any hillside development projects that are not just one single family unit. So this shows the hillside area here and here. And this is Taylor Mountain in the background. Lot 70, which is on the other side of the Farmers Lane extension, is basically on the other side of this median here, so that's not very well visualized. And then the single family dwellings would be located up this way. So the Taylor Mountain Estates tentative map is shown here and includes, well, currently is comprised of 3 lots. They're proposing 7, which is this area highlighted. So these are the 7 lots. One of them is quite large and includes that sensitive habitat deed restriction, which encompasses all of the, both Todd Creek and the very substantial creek setback that's required, in addition to some other sensitive resources. And so no development is allowed within this area. That's an existing recorded document with the county. So the residence would be located here. And then there are 6 lots north of that. This yellow area is considered private open space. The zoning code does not allow for average lot sizes to exceed an average slope of 25%. However, the review authority can exclude what's private open space from that calculation. And based on the topography of this area, these identified areas would have to be excluded to keep the lot percentages under that 25% requirement. So that is shown on the proposed map, and there are conditions of approval listed in the Development Advisory Committee report that prohibit any type of grading or construction within this area. In addition, the proposed lot sizes are consistent with the equivalent R19 zoning district and also the Hillside Development Ordinance, which sets more restrictive setbacks for hillside development areas. And although no parking could be reviewed at this time because architecture and site plans haven't been submitted, it's anticipated that each of these units would be able to meet that easily with a 2-vehicle garage and a tandem driveway. This is that sensitive deed habitat area shown in blue. This is the slope analysis map for the proposed subdivision. So this blue color is the 25% or above. So this is the steepest part. As you can see, much of the area, or much of the 25% is avoided, but there would still likely be portions of the residences on that 25% slope. And then there are future, driveways that would need to be constructed to access some of these lots. One which would be directly off of Dagus Court, and one off of Meta Court shown here. This is a visual analysis of the proposed Dagus Court area as viewed from a private yard across the way. And so back to kind of the residences at Taylor Mountain component, which is the multifamily part. A density bonus has been requested. A density bonus allows a residential density above what is allowed by the general plan and zoning. In this case, the application is proposing 19 multifamily units for low-income occupants, and this qualifies them for a 33.5% density increase, in addition to one development concession, which consists of concessions to setbacks, specifically a 15-foot front yard setback on lots 2A and 4A, where a 20-foot front yard setback is normally required, and also a 5-foot interior side yard setback on lot 1, where a 10-foot interior side yard setback would normally be required. An executed density bonus agreement is required prior to approval of building permits should this project be approved. So this means that the housing division would work with the applicant and draft up the density bonus agreement to be consistent with the city's density bonus ordinance and state law. And this agreement would require that all 19 units remain as affordable for low-income occupants for a 55-year period. We do have some revised language proposed for the density bonus resolution that maybe we should share it, or do you have that? Which just further clarifies that the 19 affordable units need to be rental units. And I can read it aloud right now if that works. So the proposal is for the language to read just in the first paragraph where it says a 93 multifamily residential project, 19 units of which are designated. It should say of which are designated to be rental units for low-income occupants. And as you've probably noticed in your staff report and also the environmental document, and upon speaking with the applicant, there is a proposal to create a condo map, and that condo map is not before the Planning Commission right now, but that is the intent, is to condominiumize the remaining 74 multifamily units, and then the 19 multifamily units would remain rental. They would not be condominiums because those are not considered to be rental units. So on that note, there is a recorded housing allocation plan contract. This was required as a part of the Quantum Meadow subdivision and was recorded in 2005 when the final map was recorded for the project. This contract requires that 19 low-income rental units be provided on the project site. And in this case, the applicant, should the applicant move forward with this project as proposed now and get the approvals, these 19 units would count for both the housing allocation plan requirements as on-site affordable housing, and then would also meet the requirements for the density bonus ordinance. That housing allocation plan contract actually allowed for all affordable units to be concentrated on one lot. The policy statement provided for the project also discusses each of the affordable units being on lot 70, which is that lot that's on the other side of the Farmers Lane extension. However, there is some density bonus language that is kind of in conflict to that, so we can talk about that in just a moment. The housing allocation plan contract would remain in effect. It's recorded on the property, and nothing about that would need to change. But as I mentioned earlier, a density bonus agreement would still need to be recorded for this project, and the applicant would need to be in compliance with that agreement as well. So one internal staff issue that's been discussed is related to the location of those 19 affordable units. The zoning code says, under the density bonus ordinance, that the location of those units is at the discretion of the developer, so long as they're reasonably dispersed throughout the development and constructed at the same time as the market rate units. So as it stands now, lot 70 would include a total of 43 multifamily units, 19 of which are proposed to be the low-income units. As I mentioned earlier, while the housing allocation plan agreement allowed for it, the policy statement allowed for it, but they are seeking an additional entitlement, which is a density bonus entitlement that includes this language listed here. And The applicant can speak more to this. I understand that from a housing contract management perspective, in some ways, it's easier for the units to be located in close proximity to one another. And then I know the applicant wants to speak more to the plan related to construction and development, so I'll let him do that. No public comments had been received until this afternoon. I did receive one phone call from a neighbor who noticed the blue sign, and his concerns were that there would be quite a few more trips generated along Petaluma Hill Road and Yolanda Avenue, and he was concerned about what type of analysis had been done related to that. And I told him that I would send him the traffic analysis that was done for this proposal in a subsequent email after this meeting. Other than that, there have been no other comments. And with that, the Planning and Economic Development Department recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the hillside development permit and density bonus to allow the development of 93 multifamily units known as the residences at Taylor Mountain, and approve the hillside development permit and tentative map for the subdivision of 3 parcels into 7 parcels on slopes exceeding an average of 10%, known as the Taylor Mountain Estates. And staff is available to answer questions, and then the applicant and his team are also here, in addition to the consultants that we worked with on the environmental document.
Any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Weeks.
Amy, can you explain again the intersection of the housing allocation plan and the density bonus, and how that would work, or what would the housing allocation plan go away once the density bonus agreement is implemented or recorded?
So the housing allocation plan contract would remain in effect. It's recorded on the properties, and it requires that there be 19 low-income units available for rent for a period of 30 years. And that's what was approved and recorded back in 2005. And so that meets the requirement under the city's housing allocation plan, which requires that either affordable units be provided on-site or in lieu fees be paid. The density bonus agreement is specific to the proposal, which allows development above what the general plan would allow. And it has some slightly different requirements, like one of them is the location of the affordable units. There's also a longer time frame in which those units need to be held as affordable, so it's 55 years compared to 30 years. So both of those agreements would exist together, and the proposal would need to remain consistent with both of them, or whatever was more restrictive in some cases.
And the 19 units would fulfill both?
Correct. So long as they are low income, they're 19, and they remain for rent.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, I've got 2. So you mentioned on the estates parcels that there are areas that are called out as public open space, and no building will be able to take place in any of that area.
Yes, there's a, pull up the,
And it looks like it's in like 3 parcels backyards. Yeah.
yes, so it's private, known as private open space,
Right.
and I may have misspoken. So it's private open space, so it still would be on somebody's private lot, but they would not be able to develop it in any way, no grading. That would be recorded on the title of the property.
But how is that like monitored? I mean, if somebody buys a house and they think, oh, I'm going to put, an arbor there and a shed here,
Mm-hmm.
like how do they just have to have a code enforcement complaint filed?
Well, so if they needed any sort of building permit, then they, when they came into the Planning and Economic Development Department, it would be noted that no development was allowed within that area if they provided a site plan, or if they spoke with a planner before. If the project didn't include if it was a shed or something like that that didn't include a building permit, then it would be essentially on the homeowner to know that that was a restriction on their property. It would be on the title. I'm not sure how else it would be enforced, though, other than really that disclosure, or unless there was a neighbor that happened to file a code enforcement complaint.
Okay, my second comment, I apologize for not writing this in an email earlier because it just occurred to me, but I know we got notes on the design review board, their concept feedback, and then they had a few tweaks and comments on the multifamily units. Were they given the policy statement, especially the 96-001F statement as part of their review?
Not as a part of the concept review. They were just providing comments, but that was not a part of what they reviewed.
Okay, because the policy statement calls out that carports should be behind fences and planting, and that stucco should be used in tile roofs, and none of that is shown on the elevations. So is that going to change design review's comments potentially? Are they going to be given this before the final review?
That has been included in their packet, and I can look, I'll take a seat and just review that, and I'll give you more feedback on that, just so I can look at the landscape plans.
Any other questions of staff? Yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
I have a question. You'll have to forgive my voice. A question about the concession for the density bonus. So I understand it's for 3 different setbacks. So the way the concessions work, I take it, is that the concession it's not a concession for one setback. It's a setback concession that can cover conceivably unlimited number of setbacks. Is that how it operates?
That's my understanding of the density bonus concessions. I would have to defer to Sue, or I can look up the density bonus law and read that exact language. It's development standards, which would allow for a more financially feasible project, which can include setbacks, height. I know it reads something similar to that, and I looked at that in writing the staff report, but I can identify the specific language to make it more clear.
Okay, thanks. And I'm just going to, I don't know if this is maybe a Sue question as well, or if that's too early to ask a question about reasonable dispersal in the density bonus context.
Yeah, why don't we wait till we get the applicants, and then we'll talk about that. Anybody else have a question? Commissioner Groniger?
This question is more probably ministerial or process. Somewhere in the staff report or some of the previous documents, there's a reference to the hillside development permit coming before the subdivision committee. Are these parcels involved in that, or is that related to the larger site? And if it's not the subdivision committee, then it would be noted, I assume, in the development advisory committee report.
So the hillside development permits that are not before you right now, so that don't cover the multifamily units and that don't cover the proposed tentative map, would have to come back to the Planning Commission for approval. So that's the development of hillside lots on for the single families that are throughout the existing subdivision. There was a reference to the subdivision committee in the staff report, and that is related to the request for a waiver of a parcel map, and that I know that we've acted on those before. That's to create the 93 condominium, well, it wouldn't be 93 condominium units, 74 condominium units, but that hasn't been scheduled. We're still working out that process and really where it would potentially go for approval. Traditionally, we've taken that request to the subdivision committee, but that has not been scheduled at this time.
Thank you.
Any other, yeah, Commissioner Rumble?
Just a quick clarification, picking up on the private open space. Yeah. So that meets the comments received from regional parks? or you mentioned a request coming in from Regional Parks to provide a sort of a buffer between Taylor Mountain and the development sites, and I just wasn't clear if that was this or if that's something else.
So the comments received from the Regional Parks Department were related to just any development basically over on this side of the property. So Taylor Mountain Park is on the eastern portion and the southern portion of this site. There's quite a buffer here. There is not a significant buffer here, and their concern is that there be some sort of buffer implemented. There was a mitigation measure put in the mitigated negative declaration, aesthetics measure 2, which talks about a buffer enhancement plan and working with Sonoma County Regional Parks on that plan. However, it doesn't, the proposal, or there wasn't a mitigation measure or requirement for the restriction of 150 feet, which is what the Parks Department had originally requested or commented on. They don't have any approvals related to this project, but their comment was that they wanted there to be some type of buffer. This yellow area, known as private open space, is due to the zoning code requirements related to the slope of each lot.
Any other questions? I have one, but first I need to add to my ex parte disclosure for Mr. Maloney's sake, add that I participated with the Waterways Committee in viewing this project, and no new information was learned there. Amy, could you go over, you said the condo map was going to be created later in the process, and I think that's part of what you were discussing with Commissioner Brown. Could you just give me an idea of what that process may look like ultimately?
So there's and Sue might be better at explaining this, but there is a section in the Subdivision Map Act which allows for a parcel map to be waived, that process, and that our city code allows for that as well, so long as certain findings can be made. This one is a little bit tricky because technically a parcel map is 4 or fewer lots, and anything above that is considered a tentative map. However, there's some language in the Subdivision Map Act that determines what is a parcel map outside of that 4-unit amount, and so the Deputy Director of Engineering has been, he's reviewed that, and we've been having discussions about essentially that process. And so should that be determined to be the correct process, this would go before the Subdivision Committee, and the Subdivision Committee would be acting on a waiver of the map process, which is like what's before you now. We've done that for a few other projects, but again, certain findings have to be made to allow for that. And then should that be waived, then it would become a ministerial action. So a certificate of compliance would be reviewed by engineering staff, and so long as it met the requirements, it could be recorded and would create airspace units.
Worst case scenario would be if that isn't allowed, it would have to come back as a tentative map through us. I mean, what if that isn't going to work, that process?
Yes.
Then what do they do? Then it's a tentative map back to us?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to know that. Okay. All right, thanks. So, is our applicant here ready to make a presentation?
Commissioners, thank you. I met a lot of you today, but those of you that I didn't meet, thanks for coming out and taking the time to see the site. I'll keep it short. I think Amy's done a great job. Before I get into anything, I wanted to go on record and make it known that these guys have done a great job. I mean, this has been, I've built projects all over Northern California, and this has been by far the most difficult one because of all the wetland issues and everything that's come up. And it's required a lot of very detailed technical assistance from staff, and they've done a great job. And I can tell you that the only thing that has kept this thing moving is the ability for the staff to work well with us and help navigate through some of these issues. So I wanted to make sure that you knew what a great job they've done, because this has not been an easy project to get figured out through all these things that we got kind of thrown in front of us at the last minute. But to address a couple things, we're confident that the language in the Subdivision Map Act will allow for us to go through that process. It's not something that we just came up with. We've spent months working with engineering and discussing it, and we feel pretty confident that that's something that will qualify to go that way. But if it didn't, we would come back as a tentative map. What's come up is the affordable units have always been designated on that lot 70. That's how it's always been since it was originally mapped. And so our plan was to always build those 19 units on the lot as it was approved. Where we had the hiccup is when we went through the density bonus, just this week when the conditions came out, there's some kind of conflicting language, because for the density bonus it says affordable units should be reasonably dispersed throughout the project. Well, what's reasonably, so it's kind of, it leaves this kind of vague language. But what I will say is that the main reason that we want to leave them on lot 70 is to disperse those units throughout the whole project, because all the other units are going to be condos and individually owned and managed by an HOA. It would be very difficult to try and manage 19 rental units intertwined with multiple parcels, multiple lots. In addition to that, we, as the owners, we think that bringing to the city a more of a combination of rental and for sale units is better for the city. Not everyone can afford to buy a place, so there's no question the city needs rental units. So what we're looking at is we have some interest in people that are interested in purchasing all of lot 70, taking on the 19 units, renting them under the 55-year affordable unit requirement, but creating the other units on that lot, the other 20 plus units, as rentals as well. So then we would end up having a lot more rental component for the whole project. But they're not interested if they're scattered throughout multiple parcels. It's just too difficult. So that being said, we have two options. One, we either sell all the units on that lot and we have more rentals for the city, or we just retain ownership of the 19 and we sell the individual units on that lot and then we manage the 19 units. So that's the reasoning for keeping it on lot 70. If you had more questions about a lot of the open space and the things from the parks were comments that, the park's always going to say, well, we'd like to have this and we'd like to have this, but they weren't requirements. And we've worked with the park extensively because of the wetlands. We've offered to give them land. We've offered to do all kinds of stuff. That's not really what they're interested in. They don't really want to take on more property, but they just want to make sure that their visitors, are, the experience is preserved, and we understand that. So we feel that what we've designed does leave an adequate buffer, and there shouldn't be any issue with that. As far as all the open space areas, we've recorded, I believe, 6 deed restrictions already on the property. They've already been recorded. So we have a 100-year fence that's keeping anything from getting close to the creek that has to be built and maintained. We have a maintenance agreement to manage certain wetland areas. As far as the question about that area in the back of those 3 lots where you can't build, the reality is that if someone wanted to build, they'd have to get a building permit, whether it was a pool or, so for someone to build something, one, they'd have to do it illegally because they wouldn't be able to pull a permit. And 2, they would be going against what was disclosed. It's on title, it's disclosed in the disclosure packet. So it would be highly unlikely that someone would be able to get away with building something. Plus, we're not talking about a huge area. It's not big enough to build another home or anything like that. So we're excited to bring this product to Santa Rosa. We know there's a housing need. it's been a challenging couple of years with all the setbacks, but, you know, we're kind of at that point where we feel like we can maybe get some momentum back and start bringing some units to the city next year, and then continue and try and get all this project done and maybe move into another area and build some more housing up here in Santa Rosa. So does anyone have any questions?
Any questions of the applicant right now? Okay, not seeing any. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
We may need you later.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Okay. This is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and see if there are any members of the public wishing to address the commission on this item. I am not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And I know Vice Chair Edmondson, you have some questions. Maybe our city attorney may need to be answering them.
Thank you. It's been spoken about a couple of times. I just wanted to ask about the reasonable dispersal requirement for the affordable units. I understand that it could be that issue isn't before the commission because it would be a subject matter of the density bonus agreement, but we have been informed about where the units are intended to go. So maybe just a little bit more detail about what our role is and how set it is after we make our decisions up here tonight, and then I might have a follow-up depending on the answer to that.
Sure. The city code provides, as you've said, that the affordable units be reasonably dispersed throughout the development and/or the phases, if applicable. And yes, that is one of the criteria for you to find in order to approve the density bonus. And what does it mean to be reasonably dispersed? The only thing that I would point out based on the conversation so far is it's both words. It's reasonably, but it's also dispersed. So whether this qualifies as dispersal of the units, that is up to you to decide. And again, the full phrase is throughout the development and/or throughout the phases, if applicable. We're not talking phases, but we are talking about a larger development. You can consider a variety of factors in determining whether it's reasonably dispersed. You may look not only at the physical disbursement, where are they actually located, but also at the nature of the development, and which will affect what's reasonable and what's not. So yes, that is within your discretion to determine.
Okay, that answers everything. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? So I have a question. I just want to make sure that if we can't make the finding of reasonable dispersal, they don't get the density bonus, and that changes the unit count and the concessions, and we're back to the original project with the recorded agreement. Okay. If you do, you need to come down to the microphone, please, so everybody can hear you.
I just want to say, if that did happen and we went back to the original project, then we would go from the 19 units being 55 years to 30 years, and they would be on lot 70, which is where they were originally. So not doing that would essentially keep them on lot 70. So either way, if we didn't find it, then they would stay on 70. If we found it to be them staying on 70, there's not really a difference, is my point. If it went back to the original, that's where they were originally assigned. So
got it. Yeah. Thanks for that. That helps. Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
through the chair, there is also the option, you have the option to approve it, you have the option to deny it, you also have the option to refer it back for consideration of some other dispersal of the units, some other arrangement of the units, so that's also another option for you.
Okay. Did somebody else have a question down here?
I
Commissioner
have a
Peterson?
question for the applicant. I'm sorry to bring you back up. As we talk about the reasonable dispersal, I understand the sort of the market forces reasoning to keep it on 70 and also the implication to be on 70 anyway. When we talk about dispersing them, are you anticipating all of the affordable units being, say, on one half of lot 70? Are you thinking there's going to be, every other building? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that we're going to have to work with the housing authority to determine what that looks like. We tried to, this has all kind of come up here in the last 24 hours, and so where it gets tricky is that if we just did, the easy way to do it would say these 5 buildings would be 19 units and then these would be for sale, which would make the most sense. The problem is that might cost me millions of dollars because many of those units are 3-bedroom units and I'm only required to do 19 2-bedroom units. So it makes it a little tricky. I think that what we would like to do is probably just have an affordable component and a for sale component. I think that's the easiest thing to do is just do that. It might cost us more money to do it that way. And if we didn't do that, then they would just be dispersed throughout all of the buildings on lot 70. But lot 70 is the largest lot. Half the units in the whole development are on lot 70. So, they are being dispersed in the largest lot in the development, right in the middle of the development. And when you look at it that way, you could look at that as being reasonably dispersed as well, since it is on the largest lot. But to give you an answer, I don't know, because I haven't figured out, it's like an algorithm. You have to figure out, what does that mean? We looked at it today and we thought we could probably take 5 of the buildings and say, these are the rentals, and then these 7 buildings are the for sale units. If that's something that the housing authority would like to do, we would certainly be open to that. We don't necessarily have an opinion either way, because I haven't had time to really look and see what those implications are. But I think that from speaking with staff, and that might be the easiest thing to do, rather than trying to just take 1 unit in this building and 3 in this building and 2, it might be a little more difficult to do it that way. So to answer your question, we're open to either way. Our main thing is just having them on one lot is going to be a lot easier to manage than having them spread out all over the whole property.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on that?
I just want to clarify, when you're saying, 5 buildings this way, you're talking about still all on lot 70?
Correct.
Okay.
So in the entire multifamily development, we only have 2 building types. We have a 4-unit building, and that has 3 3-bedroom units and 1 1-bedroom unit. And then we have a 3-unit building that has a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom. Our requirement with the housing authority per the contract is that we provide 19 2-bedroom units at a minimum of 800 square feet. When I met with the housing authority and I said, well, we don't even have 19 2-bedroom units. And she said, well, that's fine. We look at it from bedroom count. So if you take 2 3-bedrooms, then that's 3 2-bedrooms. So we can figure that out with the housing authority, but then the density bonus requires 19 units. So they don't look at it from bedrooms. So in reality, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up having to contribute more than 19 units probably to make the density bonus work, it's probably going to be 20 or 21 units that I'm going to have to end up having as BMR because I have to satisfy both components. And it's just not a perfect, it's an odd number. And so, you know, if we did it one way, we had, you know, 38 bedrooms would be 19 two-bedroom units, but 38 bedrooms was only 17 units. So it satisfies one as being 19, you know, 38 bedrooms, but it doesn't satisfy the 19 units. So therefore, I'm going to have to add 2 more units to satisfy that. So it's going to end up being more below market units that I'm going to have to provide. So, and we're willing to do that. I mean, we're going to have to do what we have to do. And ultimately, what we'd like to do is be able to provide more rental units than just the 19. I think that that's something that the city needs. And I think that we could find someone to purchase that entire lot and make it all rental units, but not if they're scattered out over 7 different lots. There isn't a market for that. To take 1 in one building and 2 in one, and it complicates it.
So again, I just want to clarify. So you could imagine someone buying all of lot 70, using them as rentals, the 19 being affordable and others at market rate.
Right.
Okay, I just want to.
Right. So we have 2 options essentially. One option is we sell the entire lot to one person and they assume that responsibility of the 19 affordable units, and then the other ones they can rent at market rate. Or if no one wants that deal, then we retain ownership of the 19 units and we sell the other ones individually. So either way, 19 plus units will remain affordable for 55 years.
Okay.
In either scenario, whether we retain them or a new owner. We just can't sell the 19 units individually. We could sell it as a bulk to like an affordable housing company that specializes in that or something, but not, you know, like one person to this and one, you know, we can't do that.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
So looking at lot 70, it looks like there's only 9 with 3 units, correct? And you said the 3-unit buildings are the ones that have the 2-bedroom.
Can we pull up lot 70 on the slides?
And so you said the 3 unit ones are the ones that have the 2 bedrooms, correct? So I'm still trying to.
The 3-unit has a 1, 2, and a 3-bedroom.
Right, and the 4-unit ones don't have any 2-bedroom units.
No 2 bedrooms.
So if you're providing 19 2-bedroom units, you've only got 9 on lot 70.
Right. So, which isn't an issue. They said we're happy to take 3-bedroom units. You know, they actually like the diversity rather than just having all the same. And so from the housing authorities side, they say, look, we just want 38 bedrooms because that's going to equal 19 2-bedrooms, which is your requirement. So that's easy to do. We can figure out which units will equal 38 bedrooms. From the density bonus standpoint, they said we don't look at it as bedroom count. We look at it or even how many, you know, if it's a 2-bedroom, it's 19 units. So, you know, we could say, okay, we'll give you 19 1-bedrooms, and they say, well, that satisfies us, but it's not going to satisfy them. So we have to satisfy both is the point. So we have to satisfy minimum 19 actual residences to the density bonus, and then 38 bedrooms to the housing authority. So the only way to do that is for us to actually provide more affordable housing than we're required to.
So you're saying on lot 7, if you do this all on lot 70, it would be some 1-bedroom units, the 2-bedroom units, and then some of the 3-bedroom units.
Correct.
19 units and 38 bedrooms.
Correct.
Okay.
It would be both. It would be
Okay.
19 units and 38 bedrooms.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
So I don't know if this, so, you know, one thing we looked at today is, you know, if we did like, you know, there's 6 bedrooms per 3 and 10 in a 4. So if we needed 38, you could say, well, here's 18, 28, 38. So this whole section could be your BMRs. The problem is that's 17 units. So then we'd have to take one of or two more units out of this building or this building to satisfy the density bonus. So it's complicated, but the good news is for the city is that the city will end up with more than 19, they'll end up with more bedrooms than actually is required.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so somebody want to move I guess we begin with the density bonus, which is appropriate, resolution for the purposes of discussion.
Okay, just
Chair Cisco, if I may.
Yes.
The staff respectfully requests another short break to do a little bit of analysis.
That would be great.
Thank you.
We could use all the help we could get.
Very much.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to reconvene. I assume staff has something more to say to us before we move on.
I drew the lucky straw, so I'm going to try to explain what we think we've come up with. So,
Okay.
just in response to the discussion we're hearing, we sense that there's an interest in understanding this reasonable dispersal. What does that mean exactly? And so we just wanted to take a few minutes. We wanted to go through our math one more time to make sure that we're accurate, and then also look at some ways in which we might be able to reach or give you some options to consider for achieving dispersal. First off with the math, there is one correction in the resolution. There's a reference to the density bonus units, and it's 19%, and that's incorrect. It's 19 units. The percentage is actually 28%, and so that would be a clerical error that we would recommend correcting.
That's in the second paragraph. We'll designate
Yes.
19% and it's
Yeah.
28%.
It's 28%. 19 units represents 28% of 70 base units. That's the actual calculation. So first thing that we did is we wanted to calculate and understand what would happen if the project became all condominiums and you could really, truly evenly disperse those throughout. That changes the project considerably because what it does is it changes the calculation. So the density bonus calculation changes, the total unit count is lowered. So instead of a 93 unit project, it becomes an 84 unit project. So the city doesn't get as many units overall. The other thing that happens is when you go to a condominium project, that's a for sale project, the level of income goes up. So it would be available to higher earners, basically. And so the city would, in addition to be losing overall number of units, we would be losing the low income units. It would go to moderate income. So that's a distinction. That's if the whole project's ownership condominium with the units evenly dispersed throughout. What's that? Yes. As the applicant indicated, those 19 units are still an obligation because they are recorded against the property. So that is still an issue that has to be dealt with. So even though we did that analysis, that requirement is still part of this project. The other thing we wanted to do is talk about the dispersal of the units on Lot 70 in combination, rental units and condominiums. And we think that there are probably a number of ways to get there where you could have buildings that have lower unit counts next to another building that has 4 or 6 units that could be an ownership unit next to a building that has 4 to 6 units of rental. So you, in the end, achieve something that isn't just a 2-lot subdivision with one parcel where 19 units of affordable units are located and one parcel where the remaining units are market rate. So in your mind's eye, you might envision something like a checkerboard pattern of a subdivision where you have apartment rental units next to condominium for sale units market rate. So we just wanted to go through that exercise to let you know that we do think there may be multiple ways to achieve that. Also, the commission could, it is at the pleasure of the commission to determine what is reasonably dispersed, and so a standalone building that has these 19 units as rental could be something that the commission finds satisfactory against the greater project in total. I think that's another way you could perhaps achieve that. And just once again, it is a requirement regardless of 19 rental units.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Yeah, Commissioner Rumble?
Just continuing on this point, I wanted to sort of validate the applicant's proposition that if it's we have 55 years, right? If we don't find, then we have 30 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And in addition, if the project goes forward as it's currently approved and the term goes down to 30 years, you also don't get the density increase. So it's a 70-unit overall project versus a 93-unit project.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, now it's time for us to put on our thinking caps, right? Oh, yes, Ms. Nicholson.
I just wanted to follow up on the questions that were asked of me earlier. So the design review board does have a copy of the policy statement for when they take action on the item, and we don't see anything that would preclude them from being able to condition the project to meet those landscape requirements related to the carports. Commissioner Edmondson asked a question about setbacks, and if those, because there are three setbacks that do not meet the current policy statement or the hillside development ordinance, if those are considered three concessions or one, and so the concession would be for a setback reduction, and so that would be considered one concession.
May I approach this?
Sure.
Two quick things. One is, I think it's important to understand if this didn't pass, what would happen is the city would lose the 20+ units of housing, and those BMRs would go back to would still stay on lot 70, right? What I would suggest is, rather than trying to figure out the disbursement, why don't I just work with the housing authority to see, because I think that ultimately the housing authority is the one that's going to have a real insight on how they would like to see those units dispersed. If we say they have to stay on lot 70 and I have to work with the housing authority to figure out what the best way to handle that is, I would think that they would be the ones best suited to work with on that, to say, you know, either they want us to have specific buildings because that's easier for them to manage, or they want them dispersed throughout the lot. And I'd be open to working with them on that, so it's not something that we have to try and figure out tonight. So I just wanted to say that I would be open to working with them on that, since that is their specialty.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair Sisko.
Yeah.
Just as a follow-up to that comment, because I do want to be clear on what your responsibility is. The commission is responsible for making that finding a reasonable dispersal, and certainly, if should you find that, we'll continue to work with the housing authority to meet all the other contractual obligations, but that finding of reasonable dispersal is in your hands.
Yeah. I think we all got that. Okay. Would someone like to move the resolution for the purposes of discussion here?
The mitigated resolution, is that our first one?
I thought the density. Oh, no, you're right.
Do we need to make the correction before we read?
Okay.
The CEQA document resolution is the first one. So you can begin with that, and then when you get to the density bonus, staff would recommend that's when you indicate the correction, and then when you get to the tentative map resolution, we also have a slight correction we will recommend for that as well.
Okay.
I would like to move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the residences at Taylor Mountain and Taylor Mountain Estates located at 2880 Franz Kafka Avenue and 2800 Petaluma Hill Road, assessors parcel numbers 044-460-001 through 044-460-071, file numbers PRJ17-006 and PRJ17-010, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay. So that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson, and like we've been doing, let's go ahead and discuss all of the issues, get them on the table. We'll have an idea of what we need to correct when we get to the other resolutions, but let's just get your feelings about all of this now. Don't figure out where to put it. Okay, Vice Chair Edmondson, I'm going to stick this one on you.
Thank you. Just a couple of the issues that maybe arose in the context of the initial study and the negative declaration. I want to talk first just about the Caltrans letter and get just a little bit more clarification. I heard that the study authors think that the study addresses the concerns in the letter. I think that's what I heard earlier. So I just want to know a little bit more in detail about how this study is a sufficient basis for the initial study that we have in our record, and when it comes to traffic impacts.
Hi, I'm Olivia Urban, environmental planner with M Group. W-Trans prepared the traffic letter, and we incorporated it into the M&D. The Caltrans letter raises a couple of pretty standard comments about traffic impact fees, operations, and transportation for pedestrian and cyclists. And so a lot of those have been incorporated and are part of and already required through the improvement plan that was issued. So for example, there are crosswalks that are provided at Yolanda as part of the improvement plan already. And in terms of the concerns about Caltrans with the TRIPS contribution to Highway 101, there's only about 16 peak hour trips that would result in total from the project, both the previous approval and the net difference of what is now combined. So what we're looking at, the net, is actually much less. So there's not a chance that it would result in any significant slowdown from the traffic onto Highway 101. Are there specific questions? That was sort of a big picture.
No, that was a perfect answer. I have one more question. It's just about scenic resources and the adequacy of the negative declaration. Farmers Lane extension may or may not go through. It's currently in the general plan. It's part of the capital improvements long-term scenario. So I take it there's no need to analyze maybe the view corridor for people going eastbound on the future Farmers Lane and what they would see without certain structures and what they will see with the project. That's just beyond the scope of the project because it's not an existing condition and we aren't sure when it's going to be built.
Well, I would also say that the Farmers Lane EIR is responsible for analyzing that and did, because this development here was anticipated at the time farmers came in.
Great, thank you.
Any other environmental questions? I can hang if there are.
I thought we were done with questions, but
Okay.
we guess we weren't. Okay. Okay. So, discussion.
Okay. I think it's a great project. It is going to add a lot of affordable units to the city. It is tough to read the density bonus ordinance and make the finding that we have to. The purpose of the density bonus ordinance is to provide an incentive for projects to not only deliver a quantity of affordable units, but also to deliver them in a way that is economically, that contributes to the economic integration of neighborhoods and social justice. And the idea is unsettling to me that maybe all of the affordable units would be at the intersection of Petaluma Hill Road and the Farmers Lane extension, and we have a large number of units that would be protected from what we can assume are going to be the harsher conditions of living at that precise area. I have to balance that against the reality that the project has entitlements already, and that without availing itself of the density bonus ordinance, we would see the 19 units developed in whatever way the applicant sees fit. So I think I have to get myself to a point where thinking that reasonable dispersal takes into account the existing condition of entitlements on the project. I'd be more comfortable making a finding that some degree of actual physical dispersal, non-contiguity on Lot 70 would satisfy the reasonable dispersal in these circumstances. For the exact reason that I don't think it's in keeping with the density bonus ordinance to have the affordable units be subject to the harshest geographical conditions of all the land that's involved and all the units that get to be aggregated to take advantage of the density bonus. But I don't know what support there is for that among my fellow commissioners, and I don't want to foreclose the possibility of making a finding that, given the very particular existing situation of the entitlements on the project and the housing contract, that it could be treated as reasonable dispersal to not condition the interlot dispersal on Lot 70. So I'm not going to make up my mind until I hear more. But with regard to, are we going to talk about all the entitlements right now?
Let's talk about it all, and we'll
Okay.
figure out where to stick or correct things if we need to.
Sure. I don't have any issues with any of the other resolutions and findings we need to make tonight with the map and the environmental report. I thought was very thorough and a really good explanation of a very, very complicated project. So I'm going to have no problem making all the findings I need to support those. My entire question and concern concerns the location of the affordable units.
Okay, Commissioner Groningen.
First of all, I have no additional questions as it relates to the layout of the project and the parcels. And I think I've been going back and forth looking at this as this terribly complex or just a very busy site in the end in terms of looking at it, because in the staff report and the supporting documents, it really clears up and takes away as it relates to engineering issues, layout, and so on. It basically tells me, and upon review, that it's a very doable project all the way through. And it will be a very nice asset to the city. As it relates to the density bonus, what's really at play here, if I'm understanding, is we have the opportunity as a city to get at least 19 additional low-income housing units. And perhaps through discussion, if I'm hearing the developer correctly, we may pick up a couple more just to get this done. And I appreciate the developer's candor and willingness to work with the city and at least all the various departments on this, which leads me to believe that I can find, if presented, a broad definition of reasonable dispersal. And I think it's in the best interest of the city to find that.
Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, on the reasonable dispersal question, I feel similarly to Vice Chair Edmondson. I know if we don't vote for the density bonus here, it would revert to the existing conditions on the site, which is the reality is they're all going to be on Lot 70. but I am interested in having them dispersed throughout, not just confined to the 19 units on these 3 or 4 buildings, but throughout the buildings on that site. Let's see, on the mitigated negative declaration, I don't have any questions or comments. The density bonus I've addressed. And the hillside development permits, the one thing that I noticed on some of the elevations we were given in our package for the multi-unit buildings is the pads did not step as they're called out for in the hillside permit. And I know that we were told on site or indicated that some of the ones on the hillside parcels would be stepped. So I'm interested in making sure that's maintained, especially on the custom home sites, and that there's not a lot of grading done for one flat pad for the custom homes. Also on the tentative map, I know the one thing I disclosed from our site visit was that the midden as currently shown in the documents is not accurate according to the applicant, and I would like to see, at least on the final map, that the actual outline of the midden and the location is shown clearly and correctly, so it doesn't come up in the future on a future question, future project, that the midden was not shown correctly. Otherwise, I think it's a good project, and I wish you well, and I think it's going to be a nice addition if you can make, get this all to move forward. And I think that's all. And I also would encourage whoever's reviewing the custom homes and also the design review board to look at the policy statement and note that it does call for stucco exteriors, tile roofs, and earth tones, not pastels. And also for screening of the carport, because I'd like to see those conditions implemented into the final designs.
Commissioner Rummel.
So I think I share the prevailing sentiment on the commission with this one. In looking at it, there's 2 things that really come out for me. One is sort of the, I don't know, phased is not the right word perhaps, but looking at the project in total, we're sort of considering things that aren't there yet, and I get a little worried, right, that those things will come through, and are we walking ourselves into something that we haven't even seen yet? But I have a lot of faith and confidence in our staff, and ultimately I can ease my mind in knowing that we have a really professional team to work those out and come forward with something that makes sense. Looking at the project in total also, though, makes it hard for me on the affordable piece. Having affordable units very literally separated out from the rest of the development is, in a sense, by definition, not inclusionary, not dispersed. So if we're looking at both of those words, reasonable and dispersed, well, dispersed, I have a hard time getting there. And if there's no dispersion at all, is reasonable, something that I can get to as well. Having said all that, I can't tell you how many times I've sat at the staff table and bemoaned policymakers' a choice of the ideal and ending up with, a lesser good. And so if I look at everything in total and I say, well, okay, if I can't get to reasonable disbursement and we're back at a lesser project because there's not, the same level of units and there's not the same level of affordability, well, bully for me for standing up for, an ideal. When we probably took away or lessened an asset for the city in total. I don't know what it looks like if we go down the path of saying in one lot we're going to disperse units. I don't know that process. I don't know what we ultimately decide here tonight, if anything at all, or if that's something that goes back to staff to find. I just don't know that process. But I do know that the point of having affordable units mixed in with others, rather than saying this one building is affordable or this, whatever it is, that is a benefit to the project in total. So if we can get to some place where, there's not just that one affordable building over there or those two affordable buildings and everything else is not, that type of separation hurts a community, hurts a project. So I think that I can get to a point of saying the benefit of the project in total, the benefit to the city, to our city, is enhanced by making the finding. I can get there. I would like to have some comfort at night when I go home that we find a way to avoid some kind of separation of any more than we already are if we vote in favor of those affordable units. All of that, it sounds like a very negative tone. I will say, driving out there and parking, and watching the construction, I think to myself, what a great project. What a great place for more housing. It's fantastic. The architecture looks like it's going to match the architecture across the street. Yay! So, I am supportive. I would like to find a way through this issue. I would like to feel better about making a finding for reasonable dispersion other than it serves the greater good.
Commissioner Peterson.
Well, I first want to thank staff and the applicant for their patience and understanding. I know this is a fairly complex issue. This meeting is run a little longer than normal. And I truly appreciate all the work that staff and the applicant have put into this. With that, I echo the concerns of my fellow commissioners. I understand the need to keep the affordable housing on one lot, but again, within that one lot, keeping it all on one section, which presumably is the less desirable section of that lot, troubles me. However, perfect is the enemy of the good, and in light of the serious need for housing, especially affordable housing in Sonoma County, in Santa Rosa in particular, I certainly wouldn't be able to sink the ship over this. Along with that, I would hope with the dispersal within Lot 70, however that may shake out, that the development itself, the low-income affordable housing in that lot is integrated to the extent possible within that larger development, within the larger community. I know that the one neighbor concern was the traffic increase. I saw that there's planned bicycle and pedestrian paths. I know the big change is vehicle miles traveled. So any way that we can integrate that community, that low-income housing in that development within the larger Santa Rosa community, I think is a positive step. And I think things like the bicycle, pedestrian paths, and walkability would be part of that. So in light of everything that's been discussed tonight, I would be prepared to make all necessary findings, including the reasonable dispersion, with the hopeful part of it being that the low-income housing, affordable housing is distributed, dispersed within the one lot.
Chair Sisko, if I may.
Sure.
While the deliberations have been going on, I had a chance to just discuss briefly with the applicant his deep desire to reach a conclusion that's satisfactory to the commission to achieve reasonable dispersal. And if the chair pleases, before you wrap up your comments, the applicant can say a few words to that.
Works for me. think we all want the same thing.
First, I wanted to clarify, I'm not necessarily saying that, this isn't showing, that all the buildings along Petaluma Hill were where we were planning on clustering. I was using that as an example. You know, for us, it may make sense to disperse it it may make more sense to disperse it throughout the whole project because, you know, certain buildings have certain unit types and certain unit types are larger. And so, you know, keep clustering them all right there might cost me $5 million versus dispersing it and saving me money. So I'm certainly open to doing that, and we want to look at that. And I think that really what I could say is that what we would need to do is disperse them through buildings throughout the lot, because there's a lot of other stuff that hasn't been discussed, but the BRE might have a problem with a rental unit next to a condo that's owned by an individual versus an entity. You know, there's all kinds of other ramifications that play into that if I start picking individual units and, you know, this and that. So there is some validity to keeping them at least clustered in buildings. That doesn't mean they couldn't be spread out over that lot. And we might find that, you know, maybe the 3-unit buildings are better suited, and so we do all the 3-unit buildings, which are all over the lot, or it's half and half, or I don't know. But certainly my intent isn't to say, okay, well, let's find the least desirable place on the lot and stick all the BMRs there. I mean, we're committed to the city, we're committed to the project. We're going from a 30-year requirement to a 55-year requirement. So, you know, we're definitely invested in this process, and we're in it for the long haul. And I think that, you know, we will certainly look at it closely and do our best to try and disperse it throughout the lot as evenly as we can, for sure.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. You're talking about dispersing it among buildings on lot 70, not among the whole project in separate buildings?
Keeping them on that lot, but dispersing them throughout that lot. Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I thought you really went grand on us there
No.
for a minute. I don't know if anybody else was thinking that, but I thought, oh, wow, okay. Okay, so you're okay with dispersed in buildings throughout lot 70?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for you? That's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Well, I think I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners that that's the interest, is that I don't know that any of us feel comfortable saying that's reasonable dispersal if we just had the 19 units all by themselves, but we can get much more comfortable with the concept of reasonable dispersal if it's throughout lot 70 in buildings or whatever. So we may need help from staff as to the kind of language that goes there, but I'll finish up my comments. I mean, I agree with everything that everybody says here. There's a tension here between what's perfect versus what actually works in the real world. And one of the things I've really appreciated, this is a very complex project. It's given me a headache a couple of times, but what I have appreciated about how it's come to us through staff is with options with the way the zoning code allows us to make minor alterations through the hillside development permit process. Because the strict application of those policies has not given us great housing. I had the benefit of going on a field trip with former Vice Chair Stanley, and we could really see how that worked and what the benefit is of really working with that additional interpretation through the zoning code of how to make a reasonably designed product that's respectful of the hillside. So I think we have had options with this project through staff, and I think we're getting options through staff with how to resolve this tension with the difference in the density bonus requirements and the housing allocation plan. I would not want to see us go back to, yeah, we get 19 units for 30 years and we don't get the benefit of extra units. We're just not in that position in the city to be able to do that. So for staff to have worked so hard, for the applicant to have worked so hard to find us a place where we can land comfortably with findings that we can all walk away with tonight feeling good and getting the benefit of those extra units and the affordable units, maybe even more than is required, I think is a great decision by this body, again, with the help of staff. So I'm also in favor of that, but I'm going to look to staff to help us. How do we articulate our findings and ensure that the applicant, we know what he means, he knows what we mean.
How about you try this on precise? So the density bonus resolution, and it is page 2. It's the key finding, and it's item B. It currently reads reasonably dispersed throughout the development and/or phases if applicable. And a suggested revision would be reasonably dispersed throughout lot 70. And that's been vetted by our city attorney, and I cannot lie, our city attorney actually wrote that.
Okay, I never thought you could lie anyway, so you're good. Okay, so is everybody comfortable with that language when we get to the density bonus resolution? Okay, so with that, we do have the mitigated, and I also wanted to say that I don't have any other issues with the rest of the project, with the 7 lots, and having seen it at Waterways. I appreciate that, there's a 50-foot setback. We never get those. And the protections, the deed restriction protections of those, of all of those natural resources and amenities. I really appreciate that. So, okay. Back to the job at hand. I believe that the mitigated negative declaration was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Peterson. And your votes on that, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks having needed to leave and is absent.
Okay.
And so that's the next one. That's our big one.
Yes. Okay, I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations to approve a density bonus for residences at Taylor Mountain located at 2880 Franz Kafka Avenue, assessors parcel numbers 044-460-001, 044-460-002, 044-460-003, 044-460-004, 044-460-005, and 044-460-070, file number DB17-002, with the correction of 28% in the second paragraph for the low-income units, and the change to 2B to reasonably dispersed throughout lot 70, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay. That was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. And I think that was all the corrections, right? Yeah, okay. Then we're good. And your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks being absent. And is there an issue? It looks like there's an issue.
We're continuing to review our math, and I think that it's a little confusing. It might be better if that second paragraph simply reads 19 affordable units and strikes the percentage.
Okay, so City Attorney, how do we just redo that or call that void?
I would suggest that you move to amend for, I think we can probably call that a clerical error because of it's a question of the math and whether we've gotten the math correct. So if there is a commissioner who would like to move to amend the resolution to substitute the language that it would be simply 19 of the units and delete the %.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so the motion to amend was made by Commissioner Rumble, seconded by Commissioner Groniga, and your votes on that. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks being absent. Next is our hillside development permit.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving a hillside development permit for the residences at Taylor Mountain, located at 2880 Franz Kafka Avenue, assessors parcel numbers 044-460-002, 044-460-003, 044-460-004, 044-460-005, file number PRJ17-006, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks being absent. We have another hillside development permit.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving a hillside development permit for the Taylor Mountain Estates subdivision located at 2800 Petaluma Hill Road, assessors parcel numbers 044-460-046, 044-460-047, 044-460-071, file number PRJ17-010, and waive further reading.
Second.
And that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. And your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks being absent. I think it's one more.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the Taylor Mountain Estates tentative map located at 2800 Petaluma Hill Road, assessors parcel numbers 044-460-046, 044-460-047, 044-460-071, file number PRJ17-010, and waive further reading.
And this is one of the resolutions that
Oh,
just
that's right, yeah.
has some minor corrections, if I can point those out now. So these are just these modifications include the removal of a few of the engineering conditions. And this is based on a conversation with our city staff engineer and the project engineer. So 2 of them are included in the actual tentative map resolution and are currently listed as numbers 2 and 3, and they're related to CC&Rs. Those are in our tentative map resolutions, but are not applicable to this proposal. So even though they technically don't apply, we want to strike those just to avoid any confusion in the future. And then the other modification is to condition number 1, which requires compliance with the Development Advisory Committee report dated September 15th, 2017, attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit A, except that conditions number 51, 54, and 57 shall be removed, and those were related to storm drainage features and a driveway, and there was, upon the conversation between the engineers, an additional review determined to be unnecessary. So that's the recommendation by staff for that condition.
Okay. And did you read the title of the resolution already? Did you read the title before these? She did? Okay.
What's the, of the resolution?
Yeah, did you read? I can't remember right now, but
Yeah,
if you did,
I
then
read
just
that,
add the amendments and we'll call it good because no one seconded it yet, so.
Okay, yeah, and I'll add the language as amended.
Second.
That's perfect. Okay. Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. right? Your voice, okay. I didn't look up. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. Your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Weeks being absent. And I believe that concludes this item. Thank you for your time and your patience. And we'll adjourn the meeting to our October 12th meeting.